Hello, Novi Sad, do you hear me? Okay. I would like to say welcome to everyone. I'm Anja Petkovic and I'm from CEAS. Uh, we are working on this project. This is our third year basically with our partners from Slovakia with MESA 10. So I would like to say thanks to them for being here with us and going through this experience. Also, I would like to greet all the students here that are present and also the students in Novi Sad. Um, I would first like to introduce to our lecturer. He is Peter Batur, and he is going to give some words about NATO summit. So I'm going to give him the word.
Hello and good morning. Good morning to Novi Sad. Good morning to Bratislava. Good morning to everyone. Happy to be back in this debates. This time I'll just spend several minutes with you, so don't expect too many words. Just few of them, and most of them focused on NATO summit that's going to take place in the beginning of July this year. Let me start with why we need to have this summit again after 2 years from Wales. Basically, it's because in Wales, NATO was facing a big challenge when mostly Russia decided to change its policy to question the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And also, it's based on the Russian decision to annex Crimea and make it part of Russia. All of this was perceived by NATO allies as something, and especially some of the NATO allies, as one of the biggest security threats, because they were afraid that if we can't or if we are not able to defend ourselves, then Russia may try to question the sovereignty and territorial integrity of these states as well. So at that time, before Wales, these states and NATO was just facing the truth that they need to adapt somehow. They need to react, but they had only several months to come out with something that would be feasible, with something that would be possible, and something that would be efficient. In that case, it was a decision which was later called something like reassurance, meaning that allies did all possible steps to reassure those states that felt threatened, that they would come and defend them, and they would also try to deter possible threats coming from the east. So basically, the Wales was about this: was how to help those states that felt threatened not to feel that way, or to reinforce their defenses. Today, we are facing a bit different situation. We've done a lot. We sent troops to those states on a temporary basis, mostly for exercises or on rotational basis, as such. And also, the allies pledged to spend more money on defense. But that was like a very immediate action, how to tackle the crisis. But it was nothing that would be very much complex in its nature. It was not something that would address the new threats or the old new threats in full, and they had to come up with something else. So what's going on to be expected in Warsaw? It will have this summit will have two parts. The first part will be to evaluate, to review what the nations pledged in the Wales summit, and whether we are fulfilling these tasks, or whether we have some gaps in what we agreed to do. The other part is something different, what we call adaptation of the alliance. It means how to adapt the alliance to a new security environment, not only short-term decisions, short-term measures, but something that would provide for security for the allies for the years to come, which means to change the structures of the alliance in a way to pledge more forces, to pledge more money, and to be better prepared if there's any security threat, including an armed attack against one or more NATO members. So basically, today, what we prepared or what I prepared for you is three questions and three answers. The first one is NATO preparing to attack Russia? This is a, I would say, very, very simple, I would say, oversimplified question that's being asked quite regularly. It's used by the disinformation campaign quite often. It's used in this country very often, and it's very often used in your region as well. That NATO might be preparing to attack Russia, and that Russia is only defending itself. So, is NATO preparing to attack Russia? My answer would be no. Several reasons why not. The first one is NATO is not the one that started to adapt itself. It's not the one to develop its forces to a larger extent. It's not the one who asked to spend more money on defense, and it's definitely not the one who deployed these forces close to our common border with Russia. We would not be probably wrong if we say that all these reactions taken by NATO are just reactive. Uh, this is nothing proactive. It's just to react on what we perceive as something as a security threat. What it means, it doesn't definitely mean that we are sending big troops or a huge amount of troops to the east of the alliance. It doesn't even mean that NATO is going to deploy its troops on permanent basis there. Uh, it also doesn't mean that NATO will be developing or establishing new bases on the eastern border. It just means that there will be more forces regularly training, regularly working and cooperating with those members of the armed forces of those states that feel threatened or that are close to the borders with Russia. And there's one more element, which is a NATO allows acronyms. So it's always a acronym. This time it's NFIU, NATO Force Integration Unit. That's the big acronym that they've been working with for almost 2 years now, which in the eyes of some are like the basis for basis. The very core of what in the future may look like a big NATO basis in these countries. In fact, there will be six of them by the time of the summit. And what it is in the reality, it is just a team of people consisting of something like 40 to 50 members, half of them always being from the host nation, the other half of those of the allies. What is the role of them? Basic role is to check whether the state is prepared to defend itself or in cooperation with its allies. In real terms, it starts with looking at the defense plans of these states, but also going through one petrol station to the other and checking whether the pistols can fit to armed vehicles of those of the allies. So it's a combination of revision of strategic documents and very practical steps, like checking the roads, whether the roads are suitable to transport troops or material. So basically, it's just 40 experts on defense and defense planning. It's not, I would say, real soldiers. It's mostly planners and those looking at the system, whether it works or not. So, all in all, when you look at this, what is NATO going to do? It will continue with the reassurance, which means some military presence of some allies on the territories of some of those states that feel threatened, and then to look for ways how to strengthen the alliance to adapt to a new security environment, since the allies in NATO think that this is a new security environment. And basically, that's the leitmotif of this summit. The second question, will NATO, and since it's not only about the threats coming from the east, and many questions have been asked whether NATO is going to intervene or help the European Union and the EU members in the migration crisis. The second question is, will NATO help Europe to cope with migration? The answer is, well, somehow NATO already decided to set up a new maritime mission, which was in fact an existing one, several ships in the Mediterranean, just checking the territory and then trying to monitor the situation and possibly also block some passage of migrants from one part of the sea to the other. whether NATO is helping Europe with migration. Well, somehow with this mission, yes. Which, in fact, when you look at all the instruments that NATO and the European Union have at hand, it's just a small part. Is there going to be more at the summit? I can say yes, there's going to be more of discussions because the heads of states and governments will feel that this crisis is something that is very close to the borders of all European allies. And we can't imagine that they would avoid this topic in their discussion. Whatever the main topic of the discussions will be, we have no doubt that they will discuss migration. Will they come up with a solution or any extra tools? I doubt so very much. First, because NATO is mostly focused on the military and civilian military capabilities to tackle crisis and to provide for defense. This is different kind of situation, different kind of a challenge, and NATO, in fact, is not that well suited to address this challenge. So, me personally, and not only me, we don't expect there will be much happening in this field. And third question, always a popular one, not only here but also in your region: will NATO enlarge? Will NATO enlarge at the summit? Will NATO enlarge a bit later than at the summit? The answer is in general, yes, we hope that NATO will continue with its open door policy, including the enlargement. The decision that was taken in December last year by the ministers of foreign affairs was that they invited Montenegro to join the alliance. What it means? The invitation is on the table. All the technical aspects of NATO enlargement have been met. All the protocols have been signed at NATO level. Now it awaits the ratification by all 28 members. Once all 28 members of the alliance sign the accession protocols, Montenegro will become a NATO member, which may be a question of several months, something between maybe 10 to 18 months. Will this happen at the summit? No, it's not enough time for the allies to ratify these protocols. Will Montenegro sit at the table at the summit? Yes, it will. It will sit there in a special status called like observer status. They will listen to all the discussions that the allies will have, but they will have no right to interfere. I mean, no right in voting. So they can observe, but they will not be part of the decisions or those who will take the decisions. Uh, Except for Montenegro, we have another candidates: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Macedonia, and Georgia. With Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is still, I would say, two aspects. The first one is that not all conditions have been fulfilled for Bosnia and Herzegovina to join the membership action plan, which is the last step of preparation towards NATO membership, especially when it comes to implementing the decision on registration of military immovable properties. The second one is that the moods in Republika Srpska are not very much in favor. They always use Serbia as a case, saying if Serbia decides to join NATO, then we will do the same. Behind the closed door, they always I would say, especially in the recent years, they say we've been seeing a lot of progress on the Serbian side. There's been a lot of cooperation between Serbia and NATO, and we've also seen the moods in Serbia, especially at the political level, to come closer and closer to NATO. So the mood in the Republika Srpska among the politicians, what we heard from the open channels, is that they have no doubt that there will be at least very close cooperation between Serbia and NATO in the future, and it will very much influence also the moods in Republika Srpska. When it comes to Macedonia, the situation is getting more and more complicated. And many years ago, it was decided, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 2008, that Macedonia will become a NATO member once the bilateral name issue with Greece is solved. Today, we are witnessing a situation where not only this issue is not resolved, but also other problems are more and more often occurring, especially when it comes to democratization, but also rights of minorities, media freedom, and so on and so forth. And the allies are worrying more and more that the situation is going the opposite way as they would expect, meaning that we have no big expectations when it comes to Macedonia's accession to NATO. And then we have probably the most complicated case of Georgia, which has the same problem as with Ukraine. that doesn't control all of its territory, and this is being used as one of the arguments why NATO cannot extend the invitation to become a member of the Membership Action Plan for Georgia. But NATO has been coming up with new plans how to intensify the cooperation, including the military cooperation with Georgia, and to strengthen the capabilities and capacities of Georgia, not only civilian but also the military ones. So, looking at this, all in all, NATO for the summit is preparing to become stronger. This has not been, I would say, the sole decision of NATO, but it was a reaction to what is happening, especially in the east, on the eastern flank of NATO. It also needs to tackle the situation in the south, which is much more complicated and which is much more foggy when it comes to capabilities that might be used by NATO to help solve this situation in the east, in the south. And then we have the standard policy of NATO, how to develop better and more intense relations with partners, how to drag them closer, how to help them if they seek for help, and how to use their assistance when NATO needs them. And this is basically the main 3 points or main agenda for the summit to come. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. I think it's going to be very useful for the students for their debate or lecture today. And I would like to ask firstly students from Novi Sad if they have some questions for Peter. Is there any questions? Um, do you have some questions for Peter? This is for the students from Novi Sad.
No, thanks.
Okay, do you have some questions for Peter here? Okay, then I will ask you a question. I know that you were speaking about NATO summit, but I would like to know, do you think that the European Union is going to do something about Russian disinformation, some kind of policy or maybe a strategy?
The European Union recognized this as one of the security challenges, I would say, throughout Europe, which is quite evident, and that's why they decided to set up a special unit that would cope with this challenge. Meaning, it's on two levels. The first one is the central level of the European Union, uh, using this unit to come up with a strategy or at least a sort of coordinated approach of the EU members. The other level, I would say, more important and I would say more obvious, is to speak about that, to consult this, and to take measures, adopt measures at the national levels. So each and every state should come up and develop its own strategies, its own tools to face this, because European Union is just, I mean, say, a sum of these states, and it will be also some of the strategies. They may help, they may facilitate the cooperation among the EU. They may even address this issue from the EU level, but or the most important thing, how to tackle this challenge as on a national level. And we know that that level of attention that is being paid to this is different. I mean, coming from Lithuania, that decided to close one of the TV stations focused on propaganda. The same case in Latvia, to, I don't know, other parts of Europe where they don't feel the urgency of this issue as such.
Okay. Okay.
You said that NATO won't deploy troops to the eastern border group. We are facing the situation today that President Obama told that there won't be boots on the ground into Syria. But we see today that he deployed 150 men to Syria. So how can we be sure that NATO isn't lying?
I didn't say that NATO is not going to deploy troops to eastern border. I said that NATO is not going to deploy troops on the eastern border permanently. which means that there will be troops rotating, doing exercises, cooperating with the armed forces of those states on the eastern flank. There are different kinds of activities, but it doesn't mean there will be new bases for these troops. Again, it's not only NATO. There's also a big portion of bilateral assistance done by the United States that the United States will be deploying not only troops for short-term rotations, but also equipment throughout Europe. It's just for this deterrence. Deterrence meaning that you need to show the other side that, look, if you decide to attack, we will be prepared. That's the main aim of this. It's not aimed at, hey, we've got the troops here, and if you do something, we'll attack. No. If you attack us, we will have enough equipment and enough forces in place throughout Europe to defend our allies. So the main aim of this is to show the presence, not to develop permanent headquarters or bases, and also to have allied troops on the territories of the states. Main role of it is, if you had only, I don't know, Lithuanian troops, it would be much easier for someone who would like to challenge their security just to send someone there and maybe injure someone or do some provocation. It's much more complicated if you have a bunch of troops there and you don't know whether the person you are going to attack is Lithuanian, Latvian, US, or German, because it would be totally different case if there's any provocation against a US soldier or against a Lithuanian one on the Lithuanian territory. And this is one of the purposes of the presence, to show that we are there together and just don't try it. It's not going to attack, but it's going to show that if you attack, we are there and we are ready.
Okay, thank you again so much, Peter. I would shortly like to say that we can start with the debate now. And regarding the rules, each team have 3 minutes, and then we have questions from the audience. The first topic that we are going to do is NATO Warsaw Summit. What are the key challenges that NATO is facing today? Will NATO initiate an overall new adaptation program to answer those challenges at the summit? And what could be the consequences if NATO fails to do that? First, I would like to give a floor to team from Novi Sad. You have 3 minutes.
Is it okay like this? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. So during the Warsaw Summit, the NATO has to revisit its decisions from the Wales Summit that was held in 2014 and see if they need a new adaptation program. And the main issues then are quite similar to those now. They have the threat from the east and the one from the south, meaning the Middle East. My opinion is that they won't initiate a new adaptation program. Rather, they will change it in minor but crucial ways, with the exception of the nuclear defense, which I feel that NATO will pass as a discrete change in its rhetoric. And when I mentioned the threats from Russia, I was referring to the crisis in Ukraine that involved Russia. And this was something that was on heavy rotation in the media in 2014, yet it took a back seat in recent years. And it might seem that not much is happening right there, but that's not the case. And NATO is well aware of this fact. And they want to protect their interests. And during the Wales Summit, they formed this very high readiness joint task force. This task force has ability to be assembled very quickly to answer some, let's say, bloody conflicts in Ukraine. But it has to be reinvented so it can assemble faster in case of in such extreme cases. And if NATO fails to reinvent itself, they will find themselves once again behind Russia when it comes to their strategy and their military readiness. So that is one of the consequences of not reinventing this joint task force. Another problem is the Islamic violence, the Islamist radical violence. There is a very real problem that's plaguing now Europe. And I think that NATO will not decide to get involved directly, because if they do so, they might risk retaliation from radical Islamists. So I just think that they will continue monitoring the sea next to the Middle East, and my opinion is that at the Warsaw Summit, they won't change their strategy. And regarding their open door policy, I think that at the Warsaw Summit, they will decide to move quicker to invite and integrate new members. We're talking about smaller countries in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, but I think they will do so because they need bases in the East and at the South so they can protect their interests. Let's say the Balkans, for example, are a good geopolitical position for NATO. And when it comes to nuclear weapons, I think that NATO will make a huge step towards that towards that direction, because just a few days ago, their top officials warned that ISIL might attack Europe and UK with biological and nuclear weapons. So this actually may be seen as a way of NATO to ready the people that NATO might embrace nuclear weapons. And this might be the most crucial part of the Warsaw Summit. All in all, I would conclude that this summit will mostly repeat the decisions from the Wales summit in 2014 in a new way, mostly because the major problems then are the same as now. But I think that if NATO decides to, so to say, go nuclear, we will be living in a much changed world, and I do not mean that in a good way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would first ask audience if you have some questions for the team from Serbia. And maybe someone from Novi Sad. Novi Sad is still sleeping. Okay, if there is no questions, I would like to give other 3 minutes to...
Okay, so hello. I would basically, I think I'm going to repeat almost everything you said, and I agree with most of the challenges that NATO is facing, because really there are threats, security threats. I'm going to divide it, so there are security threats from like the outside of NATO and from in the region, especially in the around Europe. So it's from either eastern side or the southern. Also, like there's big the presence of threat of terrorism. So NATO should focus on these issues, even though it's maybe really hard to fight against it. But and also then there comes internal challenges to NATO structures and the bases that could be built or headquarters in throughout the Europe, and how to actually increase the presence. So I think that's the most important thing they will be focusing on. And also, when it comes to new program, I don't think so that they will push something really new in a way, because it's all about strengthening the presence and the position of NATO. So the new program, I think there is no political will at the level, and also the security situation basically stays the same from the last summit. So and it's not solved, neither Ukraine-Russia conflict or the threats from the southern borders. And so the consequences of brand new program, I think, could bring more problems, because there are unresolved issues that needs to be solved, and bringing new ones into the arena would be, I think, little counterproductive. And at last, I think the migration problem, again, NATO does not have like strength or maybe power to fight against that, because it's not about the military as such. So yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for both teams, or maybe just for the Slovakia team? And the audience from Novi Sad?
Da.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne. I want to ask both teams. How does NATO wants to solve Ukrainian crisis? What is the ideal scenario for NATO?
Is this the question for the Serbian team or
For
for
both,
Slovakian? Okay. Can you repeat the second part of the question?
What is the ideal scenario for the NATO? How to solve Ukrainian crisis?
Yeah, like it was said before, they could deploy professionals there that are not troops in the real sense of the word, but rather people that will ensure that no conflict erupts there. But I think that mostly it is all about this, like I said, it's called the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force. It's a task force of, I think, 5,000 men who are able to assemble really quickly in the matter of days when something happens suddenly, some kind of conflict or let's say in Ukraine. So I think that they have to work and they are working on having troops that can respond really quickly to these kinds of problems. But also I think that apart from combat, NATO is willing to look for some more diplomatic solutions that can be resolved at the table. I mean, there is the current ceasefire agreement in Ukraine, so that's definitely a positive thing for now.
Yeah, I basically agree. I think the ideal scenario would to be not react and not have to solve it in a way, since NATO is military power, so they basically would have to engage in military action, and I think that's maybe not all of them, but I think that's the last thing they want to do. So the ideal scenario would be to solve it, somehow diplomatically, I think.
Okay, thank you. If there is no more questions, we can start with our next topic. It is about the terrorism and how will the EU be able to answer its threat, and will it? So first we are going to start with the Slovakian team.
Thank you for the floor. A lot of security researchers say that terrorism can be destroyed absolutely. Also, people can be even protected against it, absolutely. And but EU can prevent it from happening, and it will be an unending battle for it. At the same time, there is a threat of the crossing the thin line between the state security and individual freedoms, and EU has to find the fine balance between these two. So when we talk about terrorism, EU has to fight it on the several grounds. Firstly, it's a radicalization in third countries. There is a developed institution called passenger name record, which was proposed in 2011. It came through in December. It is the list of the people departing for and arriving from the third countries, and basically the authorities have all the information about them. So if they are dangerous, if they commit a criminal offense, it is easier to track them and so on. Secondly, it is radicalization here at home or in the member state. Also, there is a developed institution called Radicalization Awareness Network, which brings together practitioners, researchers, NGOs, which try to understand and tackle issues of the threats of the terrorism. And this can be helpful in the following steps which EU has to take. And the integration of the communities is the crucial part in this, because a lot of attackers come from the separated communities which are in bad conditions and so on. So the crucial and real challenge will be integration of these communities. And lastly, EU has the law enforcement institution developed. The one is Europol. It helps other member states in tackling the international crime, but it doesn't have so much power because they can't investigate on their own. They can't arrest anyone on their own. So I think the good point will be to broaden these powers. So Europol will be crucial player in the terrorism case. And also there is one system which member states don't use it, and it is very helpful. It is a Schengen information system where member states can input alerts about the people who committed the crime or something else. And when there is a border check, other countries can see that this person is dangerous and so on. So in conclusion, as I said, terrorism can be destroyed completely, but EU has developed institutions to cope with it. And if these institutions work, EU will be successful in tackling it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any questions?
Oh, not.
So hi, I'm the student of university here in Slovakia, and I would like to ask you one question. I'm not sure if it has to be to the Slovakian team or it's, yeah? Okay. So what do you think? How can the exchange of the personal data among the EU member states help to tackle the terrorism? Or is it possible to exchange those personal data, and what's your opinion about this exchange?
I think it is possible. EU tries to make it work, and it can be helpful when we need to find these attackers, when we have to cope with them, and police authorities will be able to act quicker, for example. And I think it will be very useful, but it has to work. It doesn't nowadays, so.
Okay, now I will give the floor to the Serbian team to tackle this.
Thank you. I must say that I agree with the strategies you mentioned, except with your statement that Europe can protect itself from terrorism. I believe that is never fully possible, because nowadays when we talk about terrorism, it is always related to at least one of the recent attacks in Paris and Brussels. And even though for all three of them, ISIS took responsibility, the EU is more oriented towards their own territory instead of focusing on the root of the problem. So I think that it is obvious that terrorism would stop if the situation in the Middle East could be controlled, but I don't think that is about to happen anytime soon. So Europe should find more realistic solutions in order to fight terrorism. First of all, there is an issue of foreign fighters that Europe has to deal with. I think that the EU has to be very strict when it comes to this, and that it should introduce laws against fighting for the Islamic State, because people who come back to EU from Middle East are a great threat for domestic security, and they should not be allowed just to simply come back to the EU. But in my opinion, the most important thing is that the EU should be focused on making life better in their own countries, because especially after the recent events, Muslims are even more marginalized than before. And so I mean, it is no wonder that people are turning against the community that has outcasted them. So I think that the government should work with, for example, Muslim leaders who would promote Islam, because no nationality, ethnicity, or religion should ever be identified with terrorism, and that is what people in Europe now do. If you look on the internet, there are a bunch of comments. Europeans think that they're even scared of Islam because they're not able to distinguish it from terrorism. So I think that this is one of the most important issues that Europe should be focused on. And I think that the EU is facing a very difficult task because whatever they choose to do in order to fight terrorism, they will have to sacrifice something else. As my colleague mentioned, the PNR, or passenger name records. It should be a single registry of air traffic data, so the whole European Union could share all the information. But first of all, this is contrary to the European values of privacy and freedom. And also, there were cases when Europe had information of terrorists, about terrorists, and still wasn't able to stop the crimes. And also, the other thing that I think would be useful is introducing internal borders, because, for example, in Paris attacks, terrorists were able to go freely through Europe, and they even transported weapons from Belgium to France, and this may have been prevented if there were some borders. However, I'm aware that also something else would have to be sacrificed, which is the unity of the European Union. So if we try to see which would be the best case, I think that we can conclude that there is no perfect solution and that the European Union, after all, won't be able to handle this threat. I mean, I'm not saying that the attacks will never stop, but I'm pretty sure that it won't be the European Union who will eventually stop them. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have questions for the Serbian team? Or maybe for both teams? Novi Sad? Okay, then I have a question for both teams. Do you think that the closing of the Balkan route can be the part of the solving of the problem of migrants, and do you think that it is tied with terrorism?
Okay, sorry. Well, migrants are a possible threat, but I think that we can generalize. A lot of them come to the Europe because of the war, because of the ISIS, and don't want to do any terroristic attacks here. So I don't know if we shut down the Balkan route, it will be the solution. I don't think so, because firstly, as I said, they are not all of them are the threats, and on the other hand, they will find another way. I think it won't be Balkan route, but somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea or somewhere else.
I also agree that migrants are not the primary threat. I think that most of the terrorists that we should be afraid of are already integrated in the communities inside the EU. And also, I think that it is the European Union's mistake that they did not handle this right. They did not provide what migrants needed and in a way help them. So closing the route, I don't see how it would prevent terrorism.
Okay, thank you. Now we can start with the next topic. It's about Russia. Will it be more cooperative, and when or should the EU and NATO are ready for a prolonged confrontation, and what should be the EU's policy? First, I would give the floor to Serbian team.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone hear me? So, will Russia be more cooperative? Well, judging from their present economy policy, the answer to this question would be very negative, because Russia will find is going to find every other way of dealing with its bad economic situation, but it will not be more cooperative with European Union and NATO. More Russians have been slipping into poverty on the back of the Western sanctions and low oil prices that have battered the country's energy-dependent economy and significantly diminished purchasing power. So the first example of trouble in Russia's economy from the end of the March this year is the state bank, Vneshekonombank. They will receive a bailout worth $2.2 billion after they are hit hard by Western economic sanctions. Another example is Sberbank, one of Russia's biggest investment banks, whose financial reports show slipping of economy as much as 1.5% in this year. And third, and maybe the most dangerous example, is found in poverty of Russians. The state statistics showed that the country's poverty rate are at 9-year high as the country struggles to cope with a crippling economic crisis. Recession hit economy. An average of 19.2 million Russians, or around 13% of the population, were living last year on less than $140 per month. It's pretty one minimum of subsistence level. The second argument that shows that Russia won't be more cooperative can be found in the last week meeting between NATO and Russia in Brussels. That meeting has showed a lot of different types of opinions, but that was expected, right? So maybe we can ask a few important questions. So does people around the world at this moment deserve that kind of behavior? Do we honestly deserve almost useless meetings of important people who are not solving the big problems around us? Prime Minister of Russia, Medvedev, said that the political line of NATO toward Russia remains unfriendly and closed. It can be said more sharply that we have slid into a time of a new Cold War. That was what Medvedev said. So my personal opinion is that no, they will not be more cooperative, even tough. They really should be, because of a few simple reasons. In order to strengthen the security in the world, to fix relations between neighbors, so that the economy of countries around us could be on higher level. On the second question about European Union, when or should the European Union and NATO get ready for a prolonged confrontation? My answer is that they are already prepared for a prolonged confrontation. That's nothing new. They are trying to cooperate for long years. So the European Council provides most important principles guiding the European Union's policy toward Russia. So those are the ones that I find really important, but which maybe are in shadow of others. So strengthened relations with European Union's eastern partners and other neighbors, in particular in Central Asia. Strengthening the resilience of the European Union, for example, energy security, strategic communication, and others. Need for selective engagement with Russia on issues of interest to the European Union, and need to engage in people-to-people contacts and support Russian civil society, and that can be very successful through few projects and through the NGO organizations and so on. So we can always find a solution from the both sides. So we have seen that the last year was very hard for European Union, and it is going. Okay. So it is time for European Union and NATO to find a way to create better relations with Russia and to make the world around us so much better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from my side? Okay, question.
Yeah. We have one question for both team. What do you think about Russian intervention in Syria, and what is consequence in NATO strategy behind Russia, maybe in future?
Okay, thank you for the question.
Well, Russia was trying to stop the war, to destroy the Islamic State, and now they have put their troop back. But the consequences can be very difficult for the future. Now, from this point of view, we can't honestly know that. But in a few years, maybe they can make some kind of contra effect. Yes, maybe the war is not finished. Maybe it can be a lot of worse. The consequences economy for Russia on Russia's economy is very difficult. This poverty in Russia also from 13.2% till 14.2% in 2016 is not only because of Western sanctions, it is also because of the war, because of the lot of money that is going on weapons, on people, on dying, on everything.
Thanks so much. What is the opinion of the Slovakian team?
First, we can hear your answer to the question, and then we can hear your answer for the
Thank you for the question. I think that Russia's intervention in Syria was mainly to help Mr. Assad maintain his power. They started with their bombardment of Aleppo, and they were accused by the Americans that they were actually bombarding the opposition of Mr. Assad and they were not waging war on the Islamic State. I cannot say that I can speak for the Russian Federation, for the Americans on their opinions, but I think that it is very needed and it's essential that America and Russia and NATO all cooperate on the issue of fighting Daesh, or ISIL as it is called, together and not be divided by protecting their own interests in the area. Because Daesh or ISIL is a more pressing issue than saving Mr. Bashar's presidency or supporting the rebels. I think, firstly and foremost, we need to clear the area of the terrorism, of the jihadists, and after the area is cleared, all the parties interested can have a sit down where they agree upon the new policy and upon the new leadership of the Syrian government. And considering the second question, I think I agree with my colleague from Serbia.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Vale, for your question. And now I will give 3 minutes to Slovakian team for this topic.
In my opinion, if Russia will cooperate, I think Russia is in the position that their current economic situation is not sustainable. So eventually they will be needing to cooperate with the other countries, which they are at odds with. And according to their new national strategy, it is in their best interest to do so because they're basing their strategy on being one of the greater powers in the world, such as in America, addressing the most pressing issues in the world. Now, if you as a country are at odds with all of the other countries in the world, you cannot address the issues in a certain way, or you cannot cooperate on the issues that are more pressing, because you're always at odds with the other countries who disagree with you. Their goal as a country is to raise the GDP, to raise the quality of life of Russian nationals, and to be a more open country. Although they want to achieve these goals, they are not clear on their foreign policy. If you are not clear on your foreign policy, it's quite difficult to achieve these goals. And I think that if there will be sanctions for long years to come, it will hit their economy very hard. It is already hitting the economy very hard, as my colleague from Serbia said. And they also rely on export. If they can't export goods or import goods, their economy will suffer. And if the economy suffers, so does the people, and the will of the people will change, and they will not be in support of the current government. As for the preparedness of NATO and the EU, I think it has been addressed multiple times during this debate that both the EU and NATO are prepared, or at least NATO is prepared because it has its own mechanisms in place. It has its own forces. They have the exercises. that take place on rotation in the countries that are bordering Russia on the eastern front, and they are training the nationals of these countries, the armies of these countries, to be prepared in case of an attack. But what I think is foremost needed is a diplomatic solution to this problem, because I think no country after the Second World War is prepared to enter another war that would jeopardize the peace or the form of peace that we have now. As for the EU, I think that EU is not really addressing the problem of Russian aggression in Crimea currently, because their attention is divided on multiple fronts, and they are currently divided. Their attention is divided by the attacks that took place in Paris, the attacks that took place in Brussels, and they want to contain the security issues that are pressing them at home. So I think they're currently turning a bit of a blind eye towards the Russian problem, and they are relying more on their NATO allies to take care of the preparations if some conflict would arise. But I don't think any conflict will arise, because it's not in the interest of Russia or any other of the member states of NATO to go into an all-out open conflict.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any questions in the audience here or in our side?
Hello, my question is about Syria, and I want to ask: is it possible to resolve this problem of Islamic State while is there in Syria is a power vacuum? There are no real how to say it? Is no real power there. There are no boundary. If it's so, that's my question. Is possible to solve Islamic State without power in place? I mean, while this power vacuum, is it possible to solve this problem?
I think there are solutions that can be arranged. I think it can be solved. If you remember the war that took place in Iraq in the last decade, they first toppled the government, so essentially there was no power in place to coordinate it. They tried to clear out all the problems, they tried to detain all the terrorists, all the aggressors, all the opposition, and then they tried to establish a political party. Now, I'm not a proponent of the solution, and I don't think it was perfect, because as you can see, Iraq is still in a state of disarray. But I think if all the countries interested, and I think most of the countries in the world, be it EU, USA, member states of the NATO, and Russia, they have an interest to quench the Islamic State, because aside from every country having its own problems, the encroaching of ISIL into the countries of NATO and other countries perpetrating terror attacks is not a good thing. They want to stop that. So if they could find common ground to agree upon, and they would work together to achieve one common goal, which is to eradicate ISIL, I think it can be managed. Because even during the Second World War, there was no power in place when you toppled the governments that lost. There were meetings about the division of the world, and the world was divided, and then the governments were established. So I think something similar can be achieved in Syria.
Question? Okay, just first ask Serbian to respond to this question.
Well, I can try. Well, I would like to say also this: what will happen after Syria, and what is happening right now. It is actually the Cold War that they are doing. They are doing the NATO, the United States, the European Union. I'm not sure anywhere anymore who is doing that, but they are doing that. And that the reason for that is typical demonstrating of force, nothing else. That's threat for others, threat the whole world. Maybe it will become a new real war. And the situation in Syria must be released, must be finished as soon as possible, and they need to figure out how as soon as possible. But until they have these meetings where they only express their different opinions, I'm not sure. There must be some changes in their policy of both of in NATO and in European Union. And then we will have better world finally about us. I hope I.
Okay, we have another question.
Yeah.
Let's hypothesize that for example, you are a politician or diplomat in European Union, and Russia is less and less cooperative and even more aggressive. Would you consider implementing the hard power, not just the soft power, as we could see the sanctions? Yeah, that's it.
I think that it is always easier to implement hard power, but I think in this example that you offered, it is easier. I think the best thing is to go by the middle ground.
Anja, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Your microphone in Basic don't work. Please fix this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. It's nice.
Okay, sorry. To rephrase, I think that your question is good, and it is always easier to implement hard power. But I think the best solution would be to go in the middle ground, to have a combination of both. Usually, you should always start with implementing soft power, so basically sanctions. But I think there should be meetings in place first and foremost, and if there is no other way to be found, no other solution except going with the hard power of implementing maybe some armed conflict, then it will have to be so.
Okay, and how much would you wait? Like the sanctions are in power, and how many years would you wait to implement the hard power? Or I would not agree with you that implementing hard power is always easier, because we could see that implementing sanctions was easier. And
it's not a question of time. If you're going to wait 2 months, 3 months, a year, 10 years, I think it's more question of the relevant situation. Now, they implemented sanctions because, in my opinion, they didn't want to risk alienating Russia as a future ally, firstly and foremostly, and secondly, nobody in Europe wants another world war. Nobody wants an open war. So I think it was better for them to go with sanctions. As you can see in the long run, the sanctions are currently crippling the Russian economy, although Russia would like you to believe otherwise through their propaganda, that they are self-sufficient, they do not have problems, but the economic indices show you otherwise, that they are currently in debt, that they need bailing out. But I think if there is some kind of solution where you can avoid an armed conflict, where you can avoid going to war, I think it is the better solution, don't you?
Yes, I agree, but the one thing is as well, we could see it in the past that yes, okay. We could see in the past when something is happening in the country, like for example in Germany. Yes, it's going to be a real exaggerated example, but let's see. The country was basically suffering as well. There was economic depression and people were suffering, and they were depressed. And then suddenly Hitler came and he was proposing a better, a better life or a better solution to this crisis. And I think that this is one effect of the economic crisis in Russia. That the people, they are getting, for example, nervous, depressed, and what can the Putin, what could Putin do? Because if he has no money to, for example, improve the situation and to find the better jobs for them, he could be more aggressive and try to show people how Russia is big in a way that he is going to start new conflicts somewhere else.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you just formulate the question if you have some more questions for the
So what do you
team?
think that will not the sanctions have the negative effect or having the effect that Russia is going to be more and more aggressive in a way that Putin will try to start a new conflict somewhere else, not in Ukraine or Crimea?
Okay, first the Serbian team. You can answer the question.
Okay, first of all, I would like to answer on your first question because it is really great question, and I very much love that questions, the types of questions. What if I am the chief in NATO or in European Union, but I am not, and I am right now pretty sure, so in very short lines, that those people are very capable for their work and that they can make solutions. Not one, not 10, 100 solutions. But on question what I can't answer you is where is problem there? You have question in question. Yeah. And on the last questions, of course, Western sanctions will destroy the economy totally. I mean, if they continue with this, these reports right now are terrible, and it will be worse and worse. So they need to fix that very soon.
Okay, thank you, Serbian team. Now, Slovakian team.
To answer your question about the sanctions, you cannot go straight away to open war, and you cannot let it go. If somebody invades an ally of yours, you can't just ignore it and say, "Oh, he invaded my ally. I'm not going to do anything." So the sanction was, I think, one of the simplest forms of retaliation without opening an armed conflict. And I agree with my colleague from Serbia that there are people more equipped, better educated, and with more insight into the problems surrounding global politics than I am. So I cannot imagine I'm not a dictator, firstly, that I could dictate the policies for the whole world or for whole one country. So I think she answered the question better than I did.
Okay, the time is eloping, so we are going to go to our next topic, especially interesting for people from Serbia because we had our elections in Sunday. And the topic is Serbia after 2016 parliamentary elections. Will the new government receive a straightened mandate for an accelerated EU approach? And if yes, in which areas can we expect to see its utmost demonstrations? First, I would like to give the word to team from Slovakia.
So thank you for the word. So first, I would say something about the polls. Actual Prime Minister Alexander Vučić calls for an election at the 24th of April 2016, which was pretty surprising step because the actual elections would be in the year 2018. So this is the snap elections, and he had the majority in the Serbian parliament, which was 158 seats out of 250, plus his coalition partner have 44 more seats, so it was a pretty surprising step. There were some critics about what he really wants, because Vučić himself claimed that the motivation for calling the election was to provide Serbia continuity while Serbia negotiate with the European Union in the accession process. So
this is one. This is what he said, but there was much more critics about something like that. He wants to secure some power or secure his prime minister seat until the election to the in the year 2020, because nowadays he is pretty popular. So it was so that was some point of the critics. There was much more critics. So what I think about the question, in my opinion, yes, the elections will strengthen the position of the Alexander Vučić, of the Prime Minister of the Serbian Progress Party in the Serbia, and it's because they will have another 4 years to finish the negotiation, to move on in the negotiation and the accession process to the European Union. There were some critics about this as well. Some critics said that is no possibility for Serbia or for the European Union to accept new members in the year 2020, which is the year Serbia wants it to enter the European Union, because of the rise of the waves of immigrants and other inner problems of the European Union. The next critics was that as we can see, the popularity of the prime minister is on the it's going down, because he just get 131 seats right now. So we can see that it's going down. So but I think the 4 years is enough to implement some needed reforms and some needed implementation for better position while negotiating the membership of the European Union. So, in which areas we can see its utmost demonstration? So, I think the first area is the main point of the negotiation, the Serbia with the European Union, is the Kosovo. Is the Kosovo issue, Kosovo question? It's really the most important question which is on the table. European Union can't afford to enforce the recognizing of Kosovo by Serbia, because the 5 members of the European Union didn't recognize Kosovo as well. For example, Greece, Spain, or Romania. So the European Union just want the normalization, the normalization Serbia and Kosovo relations, which could be the point Alexander Vučić will have to focus. So the corruption is the second point for me, because the corruption.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you just wrap it up, because
Okay.
your time is up?
So there's far more points which needed to be reformed. I just mentioned some of them. The corruption, which 98% of Serbians seems the corruption like really relevant and really serious problem. The next is the privatization, because there is really not good possibility for companies to get some private factories or so. Rise of the extremism, protection of human rights, and freedom of media is the things that I hope Alexander Vučić will focus in these 4 years. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions before we go to the Serbian team? Novi Sad? Okay, and then I will give the word to a Serbian team.
So as everybody knows, a few days ago in Serbia there were early parliamentary, regular, provincial, and local elections. We should note that these elections were early elections, which means they are used by the leading party of Alexander Vučić to strengthen its mandate. Also, we need to take a look at last parliamentary elections of 2014, where today leading party called SNS had 48% of votes, while the second party called Socialist Party of Serbia had 13.5% of votes.
Those two parties were in coalition, and they were for European Union integration. This year, in elections, the strongest party, which means SNS, got 100,000 votes more than the last elections, but they got 27 places less in parliament this year because almost all opposition parties succeeded to enter parliament. Today in parliament, we have three right-wing parties, which are against Euro integrations. Those are Serbian Radical Party and Coalition of Democratic Party of Serbia and a party called Dveri. I would not agree with my colleague that these elections were a surprise because Aleksandar Vučić needed to gain strength in part of Serbia called Vojvodina, and now he has strength there. Most of parliamentary parties in Serbia belong to center place of political compass. So the difference between them is so little that if you ask common man to tell you the difference between parties, his answer would be the president of party is different. We live in a time where political program is not really important. What is important is leader. Medias are giving us clash of titans instead of clash of ideas. So the people can be easily manipulated. Since most parties belong to the center place of political compass, there is consensus between them about the EU integration. Only parties of the right wing are not for the EU, but for the alliance with Russia. If we speak about areas in which we can expect accelerated EU approach, I think it doesn't really depend much on Serbia because our politicians will do almost anything that EU tells them to do, except the things that are really unpopular between people, like accepting Kosovo as independent state. So I would agree that Kosovo is a really important topic in EU integration. Accelerated EU approach will depend on European Union itself and its will to accept the new members.
Okay,
Serbia,
you need to conclude now.
I will be really short. Serbia declared that it wants to be in the European Union, so the entrance depends on various factors like harmonization of our laws with European Union, relationship with Croatia, and the strength of opposition in Serbian parliament. These elections could be the constitution of a new opposition force in parliament. Since the last convolution of parliament, there was almost no opposition. So the radicals are really a strong opposition, and we could expect, I think that we could expect an early elections in about 2 years.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any questions from the audience? And in Novi Sad? Okay, I have a question. Maybe it's better for Serbian team to answer it. How do you comment that in these elections we actually had 5 pro-Russian parties and 2 of them are basically in the parliament now? Can you get some conclusion from that?
Yeah, well, I think that most of the parties are choosing populist topics. So the Serbian people were always between Russia and Western Europe. So I think that if we have 5 pro-Russian parties because people are still not decided if they want to be in European Union or they want to be in some alliance with Russia.
Okay, thank you. If there is no more questions, we are going to get to our final topic. Is Slovakia's EU presidency? What are your expectations of the presidency, and can we expect anything unforeseen? First is the Serbian team.
Thank you.
Well, my expectations are that Slovak presidency of the Council of the European Union will have a greater impact on the position and reputation of this country in the European Union. This presidency will show how much Slovakia is able to cope with negotiation among EU member states, but also it will show how much Slovakia is capable of achieving when it comes to their national interests. According to analysts, it is an opportunity to show that Slovakia is a major country able to lead negotiation among EU member states. I see this as opportunity to Slovakia. You see, in the first half of the 19th, Slovakia began the implementation of EU economic standards and is member of the Union since 2004. Assimilation with EU standards is most important in areas like justice, freedom, jobs, and of course a stronger EU in the world. These are the top priorities for the Council, as agreed by the three presidencies for the period between January 2016 and June 2018. The Netherlands, Slovakia, and Malta, the so-called trio. I think it is interesting to see if program of presidency trio will be continuous or it will change every 6 months depending on the arrival of the new country. I think that this is also a chance for Slovakia to show its ability for leadership. I believe that something unforeseen could be Slovakia's stance on one of the burning issues of the moment, migrations and resettlement of refugees. Slovakia has this situation where its stance is not far removed from that of Hungary's. Prime Minister Robert Fico sided with Orban and with Poland in opposing quotas for resettlement. There is no united view among diplomats whether Fico's negative stance toward EU quotas for redistribution of migrants would leave an impact on the presidency. And they also intend to point out that Eastern Europe is neither financially or culturally suited to deal with large migrant influxes. So, as a conclusion, I would say that Slovakia will have difficult tasks on the table, and that's going to be interesting to see how it's going to handle it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from Novi Sad? And here, do you have some questions? Okay, we will go to the Slovakian team.
Okay, so basically, I agree with lots of those things. From my point of view, since we are actually Slovakian, so what we do expect, I think the most important thing is to kind of do well in a way to communicate with other EU institutions that are crucial. Also, we know that Slovakia is not a big country and it's not in the European Union for such a long time. So the real kind of means of what we can do are limited when we compare it, for example, to Netherlands or the UK that will come after Malta. So we have to have that in mind, that we can really set out huge goals because first, because of the institutional arrangements, and then because of the size of the country and also the staff we have for that. But I think the most important thing is to remain or like have the continuity of the policies and work with Netherlands teams that were Netherlands government and also the Maltans, so we have like some kind of progress in European Union. Of course, in Slovakia now there's like huge topic is refugees. I don't think they will solve much because the countries are divided on the issue in the European Union, and from our position, we still have to respect the bigger countries, no matter if we have the presidency. So I don't expect any huge improvements or any huge results from that. And the second question was, can we expect anything unforeseen? And unfortunately, I think these days we should expect, because we never know. And this is one thing that I could pose as a threat, because if something happens in the European Union, let's see some terrorist attacks that happen in Paris, for example, or Belgium throughout our presidency. I think they would put a really big stress and strain on our country, even though we it's hard to handle. So I think that's something I'm foreseeing that could really really mess things up in a way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to ask a question. It is basically for both teams. Do you think that Serbia will benefit from Slovakia's EU presidency? And if yes, in what way? Who's going to answer first? Do you want first?
I don't know. Maybe maybe in a way of the position of some, we have the same position in Kosovo, then basically you do, so we do not agree with that, but as Slovakia, but I'm not sure these topics will be discussed or will be even promoted. Maybe the size can be seen like inspiration, the size of country, but also Serbia's not really, or maybe the migration topics, if that comes up, or it will come up. I'm sure there will be talks, but we'll see how that evolves. So I don't have like clear answer to, or how would it benefit actually.
Well, I don't think so.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think that Serbia won't have any benefits of this.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. Is there any questions from the audience? And Novi Sad, do you have some questions? Okay.
I have one question. It's a question actually for the Slovakian debate team. Republic of Slovakia actually is a part of NATO, and participation in many combat action of NATO in the crisis area of the world. What do you think? What is your, in basic, your opinion? Do exist the terrorism threat in territory of the Slovakia?
Okay, thank you for your question, Lado.
You're welcome.
So the question was if there are terrorist threats in Slovakia, or what I think about it.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, I personally don't feel like that. From I think population in Slovakia doesn't feel threatened by terrorism on our territory. My family would never let me go out of the country, but they don't feel like it's going to happen here. So I think in the politicians there were made lots of actually. I was surprised precautions when the Paris attacks happened, because like the next day there were increased police presence in the streets, on the airports. It really, we saw that with our own eyes in the streets. So that happened. They really were responsible and they took some actions. So we felt that from the government, but I think Slovakian people, we are not really scared of that in the country. But when it comes to law enforcement and police, we could see the actions immediately after the attacks. So that would be the answer.
Okay, thank you so much. If there is no more questions, I would like to thank to the audience here in Bratislava and also audience in Novi Sad. I would give the word to Milan if you want to say something.
Thank you, Anja. I just wanted to send our regards to Novi Sad. Thank both teams here in Bratislava for an excellent debate. Thank the university coordinators in Novi Sad and here in Bratislava for preparing and working excellently with the teams. And of course, we are all looking forward to continuing our debates next semester. So all the best to Novi Sad, and thank you very much for a great debate. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Milan.
Thank you, Milan. Thanks so much. Bye. Bye.